The stage lights were blinding, the roar of the crowd was deafening, and yet, he looked like he wanted to vanish. It was 1993, MTV Unplugged in New York. Kurt Cobain sat beneath a chandelier of white lilies and black candles, a setup that looked more like a funeral than a concert, and maybe that was the point. He barely looked at the audience. His sweater hung loose off his frail frame, his voice haunting, raw, almost too honest. He sang, "Where did you sleep last night?" And in the final notes, when the camera zoomed in, his eyes opened wide then froze, like he'd seen something none of us could. And then, silence. For a moment, everyone watching held their breath. It was beautiful, it was iconic, but if you looked closely, it wasn't performance. It was a cry for help. He wasn't just singing, he was unraveling. This was the Kurt Cobain the world worshipped, the voice of a generation, but beneath the plaid, the fame, and the guitar strings was a boy who had been breaking long before the world ever knew his name. We didn't see it, or maybe we didn't want to, but behind every scream from the stage, there was a whisper of pain behind closed doors. This is the story of Kurt Cobain, not the myth, not the martyr, the man, and the battle he never asked for, but fought every single day. Before the screaming crowds, before Nirvana, before the headlines, there was just a boy in Aberdeen, Washington, drawing in his notebooks, trying to stay invisible. Kurt Donald Cobain was born on February 20th, 1967. From the outside, he was just another small-town kid. But inside, things were already unraveling. He was bright, sensitive, artistic, and painfully aware of everything. Even as a child, Kurt felt things deeper than most. The world wasn't just a place to him, it was a wound, a constant ache. He once said, "I remember feeling ashamed all the time. I couldn't face the world." When he was 9, his world shattered, his parents divorced, and Kurt changed. From that moment on, he described himself as emotionally withdrawn, angry, and confused. He bounced between homes, often feeling like a burden. He once wrote in his journal, "I remember feeling so embarrassed and ashamed. I couldn't understand why I couldn't just be loved by both of them at the same time." That split tore something in him. It planted a belief that would haunt him for the rest of his life. If love leaves, maybe I was never worthy of it to begin with. In school, Kurt was different, too sensitive to fit in, too poor to blend in. He was bullied, not just for his size or his clothes, but for who he was. Quiet, artistic, kind, all the things the world doesn't reward young boys for being. Music became his shield, his escape. He discovered the Beatles, the Sex Pistols, Led Zeppelin, and suddenly he had a way to scream without getting hurt. But even as he picked up the guitar, another war was starting inside him. As early as age 12, Kurt began showing symptoms of attention deficit disorder. Restless, unfocused, impulsive. Doctors would later say he likely also had undiagnosed bipolar disorder and severe clinical depression. In his journal, he wrote, "Sometimes my body feels like it's filled with 1,000 bees. Other times, I can't even lift my head. I've never felt normal." He wasn't exaggerating. Kurt's mind was never quiet, and neither was his body. As he grew older, he began experiencing intense chronic stomach pain, nausea so violent it left him vomiting blood. The doctors couldn't figure it out, but Kurt knew what it really was. "I think it's all from depression," he once told a friend. "Pain that moves. It doesn't care where it goes, it just wants out." He self-medicated, first with weed, then with acid, later heroin. Not to party, but to shut the noise off, to feel numb, to survive. And yet, in the midst of this inner storm, there was genius. He began writing songs about alienation, rage, shame, and the aching desire to be seen, not by millions, but by someone, anyone. And maybe that's the most haunting part of Kurt's early life, that even when the world told him he was nothing, he still chose to give it music. He gave it poetry. He gave it truth. Because even back then, when he was just a kid with a cracked heart and a cheap guitar, Kurt Cobain was trying to turn pain into something beautiful. And that's exactly what he did. Fame didn't come gently for Kurt Cobain. It came like a tidal wave. One day, he was playing grimy clubs in Seattle, barely scraping by. The next, his band Nirvana was the voice of a generation. It happened fast, too fast. In 1991, Nevermind dropped like a bomb. The first track, Smells Like Teen Spirit, exploded across MTV and radio stations like nothing before. Suddenly, grunge wasn't underground anymore. It was everywhere. And Kurt, he was crowned king. But he didn't want to be king. "I'm not your spokesman," he told Rolling Stone. "I'm not even sure I want to be here." The world saw Kurt Cobain as a rebel god, the reluctant messiah of a disillusioned generation. The torn jeans, the hollow stare, the broken voice that made millions feel seen. But the truth was, he was drowning. Fame had always been the dream, but now that it was real, it felt like a trap. The more people praised him, the more fake he felt. He wrote in his journal, "I feel like a fraud. Everyone thinks I'm strong, but I'm terrified. I didn't sign up to be worshipped." The pressure to perform, emotionally, creatively, physically, became unbearable. The interviews, the tours, the cameras, all of it demanded pieces of him he no longer had to give. His body was breaking down. The stomach pain worsened. The depression deepened. The only thing that dulled it was heroin. People said he was in utero. Nirvana's 1993 follow-up album wasn't just music. It was a scream, a raw, bleeding confessional of a man unraveling in real time. Songs like Heart-Shaped Box and All Apologies weren't metaphors. They were suicide notes in melody, and millions sang along, not realizing how literal they were. His marriage to Courtney Love only made the headlines louder. They were punk royalty, chaotic, brilliant, broken. Together, they brought a daughter into the world, Frances Bean. And for a moment, Kurt seemed okay. Fatherhood gave him something to hold on to. He wrote about his daughter constantly. "She was," he said, "the only reason I'm still breathing." But fame doesn't pause for healing. The cameras didn't stop clicking. The rumors didn't stop swirling. Every smile was analyzed. Every stumble labeled a relapse. He was either a savior or a disgrace, nothing in between. And that's the part the world forgets. Kurt Cobain wasn't trying to be anyone's icon. He was just trying to survive his own mind. He said in an interview once, "I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not." But what happens when you're not even sure who that is anymore? When your face is on magazines, but your soul is crumbling backstage? When your voice moves millions, but your own thoughts are screaming over it? That was Kurt's reality. The higher he rose, the more he disappeared. He wasn't chasing the spotlight anymore, he was trying to outrun it. And the world, it kept watching, kept applauding, kept buying records, never realizing that behind the icon was still just a boy from Aberdeen, begging to be seen for something real. The cracks had always been there, but in 1994, they finally gave out. By that spring, Kurt Cobain wasn't just spiraling, he was vanishing. His mind was unraveling faster than anyone around him could hold it together. His heroin use had become constant, not recreational, not even rebellious, just survival. A numbing agent, a way to make the day tolerable, or at least forgettable. And his body was paying for it. The stomach pain, the same relentless burning he'd described since he was a teenager, had reached unbearable levels. He wrote in his journal, "If it weren't for this damn stomach thing, I'd be the happiest man alive." Doctors couldn't diagnose it. Therapists couldn't soothe it. His bandmates were growing distant. His marriage to Courtney was fractured. And his own reflection, he didn't recognize it anymore. Still, he tried to fix it. In March 1994, Nirvana flew to Rome for a tour stop. It was supposed to be routine, but instead, it became a warning. One morning, Kurt was found unconscious in the hotel room. The press reported it as exhaustion. Friends knew better. Still, they hoped it wasn't too late. Back in the States, Courtney staged an intervention. Friends, managers, bandmates, they all showed up. Some cried, some begged, some threatened to walk away. Kurt listened, silently, detached. Then he agreed to rehab, He checked into the Exodus Recovery Center in Los Angeles, a place designed for second chances, but he didn't stay. After just a few days, he scaled a wall and disappeared into the night. No one knew where he'd gone, not exactly, but on April 5th, 1994, everyone found out. Kurt Cobain was 27 years old. He was found in the greenhouse above his Seattle home with a shotgun and a note. The note wasn't angry. It wasn't even messy. It was painfully lucid. He spoke of his love for music and how the joy had faded. He spoke of Frances, his daughter, and how he couldn't bear to teach her pain by staying. He spoke of empathy, of burnout, of a loneliness that fame could never fix. His final words echoed like a scream across a generation. It's better to burn out than to fade away. Millions mourned. Teenagers lit candles. Radio stations went silent. Fans covered their walls in black and scribbled his lyrics like scripture. And the media, they did what they always do. They dissected, analyzed, sensationalized. They talked about drugs, about Courtney, about the 27 Club. They turned his death into a myth. But the truth was so much quieter. Kurt Cobain didn't die because he was a rock star. He died because he was human. Because he was sick. Because he was sensitive. Because he carried the weight of too much for too long, and no one knew how to help him carry it. Because in a world that worshipped his pain, no one truly saw it. There's a photo that always resurfaces. Kurt sitting on a stage, guitar in hand, eyes distant. The caption reads, "Lost in the sound." But maybe he wasn't lost in the music. Maybe he was just disappearing into it. Music was the only place where he didn't have to explain himself, didn't have to smile, or pose, or pretend. It was the only place where his pain had a voice. But even that stopped being enough. Because depression doesn't care about talent, or success, or record deals. It cares about silence. It feeds on it. And Kurt, he'd been silent for too long. He said once in an interview, "I'd give anything to feel normal for just one day." Let that sink in. Not rich, not famous, just normal. That was the dream. And yet, he gave the world so much more than that. A sound, a rebellion. But no one knew how to catch him. They saw the flannel, the raspy voice, the smashed guitars, an iconic MTV Unplugged performance. But they didn't see the boy who cried himself to sleep as a child, or the man who stared at ceilings at 3 a.m., wondering if he'd make it through another day. Because Kurt Cobain's real battle wasn't against the media, or fame, or even addiction. It was against himself. He once wrote, "I hate myself and I want to die." People treated it like a song title, like a brand, like it was just a part of the grunge persona. But it wasn't an act. It was a confession. Kurt had suffered with depression since childhood. He spoke, when he rarely opened up, about a deep, aching sadness that followed him like a shadow. He was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and later clinical depression. The ADD made him feel scattered, unfocused, like he didn't belong in classrooms or conversations. And the depression? It made him feel like he didn't belong anywhere. In his journals, he described his body as a prison. He wrote about physical pain so intense, particularly his chronic stomach issues, that it left him paralyzed by discomfort. He would vomit blood and water, scream in agony, and yet, no clear diagnosis ever came. Pain with no name, illness with no cure. So he medicated with what he had. Heroin, alcohol, painkillers, even music. Not to get high, to escape, to feel anything other than the numbness or the pain. But the more he used, the more disconnected he became. From his friends, his wife, his daughter, and from himself. And no one knew what to say. Because when you're famous, people expect your sadness to come with an explanation. But Kurt's pain didn't come from stardom. Stardom just made it louder. He hated the way fame distorted things. Fans didn't see Kurt anymore, they saw a symbol. A spokesperson for disillusionment. A rebel they could project their own anger onto. He once said, "I'm not your voice. I'm just a guy with a stomachache and a broken heart." That's what made it worse. He wasn't allowed to fall apart. Not publicly. When he did, they called him moody. When he isolated, they called him selfish. When he cried, they called him unstable. Even in his own home, Kurt struggled to feel safe. He feared being judged, misunderstood, or pitied. So, he kept quiet. He'd vanish into bedrooms for hours, sleep for days, refuse to eat, then suddenly show up at a rehearsal and joke like nothing was wrong. People thought he was unpredictable. He wasn't. He was just surviving. And that's the part most missed. Kurt wasn't trying to be dramatic. He wasn't trying to make a statement. He was trying to stay alive in a world that never stopped asking for more of him. His marriage to Courtney was chaotic. Two broken people trying to love each other while drowning. He loved his daughter Frances with every part of himself, and he feared she'd grow up only knowing his pain. That guilt tore at him. In one letter, he wrote, "I just want her to have a better life than me, a happy one. I don't even know what that means, but I want it for her." That was his heart. Not the icon, not the headlines. The father who wanted to stay, but didn't know how. And that's what depression does. It twists your reflection. It isolates you. It convinces you that the people you love would be better off without you, when the truth is, they'd give anything to keep you here. Kurt's silence wasn't weakness, it was protection. He hid the worst of himself not because he didn't trust people, but because he didn't want them to carry what he couldn't let go of. In the end, it wasn't the fame or the music or the chaos that took Kurt Cobain. It was the loneliness, the silent war inside him, the one too many of us are still fighting. April 5th, 1994. It was raining in Seattle, as usual. The house on Lake Washington Boulevard was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, unnatural. Kurt had disappeared for days before, but this time, something felt different. He'd checked out of rehab just days earlier, escaped really, no fanfare, no goodbye, just slipped out, walked into the night, and vanished. Friends were worried. Courtney tried calling everyone he trusted. No one had seen him. They all hoped he was holed up somewhere, writing music, painting, getting space. They hoped it was just another break from the world. But deep down, some of them knew. Kurt wasn't running away this time. He was saying goodbye. Inside the greenhouse above his garage, they later found a note. It wasn't long, but it was enough. Addressed to Boda, his imaginary childhood friend, the letter was raw and poetic, like everything he'd ever written. He talked about how he had everything. Love, admiration, success, but still felt nothing. He talked about how the light inside him had gone out long ago. And then he said something that still haunts millions. It's better to burn out than to fade away. That line, it wasn't a punchline, it was a resignation. Kurt Cobain died by suicide on April 5th, 1994. A shotgun, a final choice, at only 27 years old. The news broke days later, and the world shattered. Fans didn't believe it at first. Then came the candlelight vigils, the sobbing crowds, the radio tributes. People played Nirvana tracks on loop, dissecting every lyric, every scream, looking for signs they missed. But the signs had always been there. Kurt had been telling us he was in pain all along. We just didn't know how to listen. He didn't leave this world because he didn't care. He left because he cared too much and didn't know how to survive the weight of it. He once said, "I'm too sensitive. I need to be slightly numb just to exist." It wasn't weakness. It wasn't selfishness. It was exhaustion. Years of fighting inner demons, shouldering expectations, drowning in fame, and never truly being heard. Kurt didn't want to be an icon. He just wanted peace. And the heartbreaking truth? He never really found it. Not in the world anyway. But maybe, just maybe, by telling his story, someone else will. If I could tell you one thing, just one, it would be this. You're not broken. You're just hurting. And hurting doesn't mean you failed. It means you're still feeling, still human. I know how it feels to wear your pain like armor, to smile in front of crowds while your soul screams behind your eyes. I did it for years. People thought I was a rock star, an icon. Some even called me the voice of a generation. But inside, I was still that kid from Aberdeen, the one who didn't fit in, the one who was too quiet, too sensitive, too everything. I carried that kid with me everywhere, onto stages, into interviews, into songs. And I really tried, to numb him, to shut him up, to make him fit the version the world wanted. But he never left, because your pain doesn't disappear when you hide it. It just grows louder in silence. If you're out there and you feel like you don't belong, if you're tired, if you feel like the world's too heavy and no one really gets you, I want you to know you're not alone. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to be strong all the time to be worth something. You don't have to create masterpieces just to justify your place in the world. You deserve rest. You deserve understanding. You deserve help, even if all you can do is whisper for it. I wish I had whispered louder. I wish I'd said, I'm not okay. Maybe if I had, things would be different. But maybe that's why you're hearing this now. So you don't have to carry your pain alone. So you don't have to turn it into art just to make it feel valid. So you know, you matter, as you are, right now. Don't burn out just to be seen. Shine, because you were born to, not because you have to.